Good evening. I am Dr. Gregory Salters. I am currently serving as an interim assistant chief at one of our law enforcement agencies down in South Florida. How is everyone doing? I'm glad to be here, glad to talk with you all. A lot of things have been going on in our community, and we are really moving our agenda forward. As we're talking tonight, I started thinking about everything that people are talking about in our community. We've seen a lot of things regarding law enforcement officers. We've seen a lot of things happening in our communities, and we see a lot of change going on just because of what's going on in society. And I started talking with a lot of professionals that are out there, those that are in our community, and as well as our law enforcement family. And when we're talking, we're saying, what is it that we need to do to let people know what we do as professionals? What is our job? What do we do? And I figured out the best way to really get this message out there is to find out what is an outstanding law enforcement officer. And that can be from a number of standpoints. We want to find out from you, our community. What do you consider an outstanding law enforcement officer? As law enforcement professionals, who or what do we consider to be professional law enforcement officers? And I don't mean just your average cop. What really makes people outstanding? We've been able to identify individuals that have tarnished the badge, but who are some individuals that have really polished the badge and really made an outstanding example of our profession? Just as we know individuals that have tarnished it, each of us can name various law enforcement professionals at various agencies that really do an outstanding job. And when you look at what they do, many of them have similar characteristics. And what my intent is tonight is to share with everybody what type of characteristics we're looking for in the profession from a professional standpoint. We also want to hear some input from those of us that are in the community. From the community, what would you consider to be an outstanding law enforcement officer, and what makes them outstanding? Is it the way that they live? Is it the way that they engage? Is it the way that they do investigations? Is it the way that they clean their police car? What is it that actually makes for an outstanding law enforcement professional? Because if you don't know, law enforcement has gone over a lot of changes over the years. All the way when we started out, it was height and weight requirements. It was, you had to be certain height, certain weight to be in law enforcement, because at that time it was looked upon more as a job. But even if you go back before that, you can go back to when it was property rights and where the law enforcement really was your trustees getting back the slaves back to the plantations because it was the property rights. Then you have taken it as a profession to where it was a physical profession. And then as we progress to taking tests, having standardized testing and things that we do now, to a profession and having a code of ethics which guides us. What is it that actually makes for an outstanding police officer? When you look at it, many individuals have tried to get into law enforcement. They've gone, they've applied, they've wanted the jobs, and sometimes they were successful and other times they were not successful. What causes individuals to be successful in becoming a law enforcement officer? Or what happens when some are not successful in their quest to be law enforcement officers? Are there things that we should tell them? My story is I never wanted to be a law enforcement officer growing up. It was never really an option for me, because in the neighborhood I grew up in, that wasn't where a lot of our mentors were. When I went to college at Florida A&M, I was majoring in business, wanted to be out there impacting the community, doing things and having my own business. Same thing when I was in banking. I wanted to get out there, help the community, do some financial education. And so therefore, in my journey, I figured out my true why was to help others succeed, help them get to the next level. And my life philosophy is, if I can help somebody as I pass along the way, my living will not be in vain. When you talk to many individuals that are working in law enforcement, their passion and their desire to help others and help the community is very similar to mine. So what do we actually do, and how do we actually describe our law enforcement officers? Let's talk about it. When you're going into the police academy, you really don't know what law enforcement is all about. You're taking your classes and you're in law enforcement. The classes, many people talk about we need to have more training, but we're having over 700 hours of training. And in the law enforcement academy, I can tell you the law enforcement academy is preparing you to get out to be a basically trained officer, but they are not putting you out there or intending to make you be a seasoned officer. That's why you have additional training when you come out of the police academy. You have your field training officer, which is basically your on the job training. And then you're also on your own and shadowed. It is very similar to what happens in many businesses. You get in the job, you have on the job training, and you begin to learn the culture of the organization. You begin to learn how you really do your job. And as you have those life experiences, different individuals are going to do different jobs, different ways. And it's very interesting to me when you talk about community-oriented policing and a lot of the philosophies that are occurring now. Many of those philosophies are the same way that individuals did policing long time ago. You would have your beat cop. They would know everybody in the neighborhood. How would they know everybody in the neighborhood? They would be talking to them, interacting with them out of their cars and interacting with the neighborhood. And when you know people in the neighborhood, you can find out what's right, what's wrong, and how different people respond. Now we're talking about it and we'll call it community-oriented policing. What are we doing? We're getting out there in the community. You're engaging the community. You're engaging the businesses to see what it is that they need, because each community is very distinct and has different needs. When I look at individuals that have been named as outstanding officers, outstanding detectives, or outstanding employees of police departments, you will find out that the most outstanding individuals are the ones that are connected the most to the community. How many of you all have had detectives, or you've gone on scenes and you're asking questions and individuals might say, where is officer so-and-so? Where is detective so-and-so? Where is sergeant so-and-so? That means that they have a connection with that particular individual and they are willing to help that particular individual. And that particular individual has really built that bond with them. And then when you talk about that outstanding officer, you think about it. How many times those of us that have been in law enforcement, you'll go to a call, you'll be on the call, and you hear a certain officer responding to assist you. If that is an outstanding officer, it begins to be a welcome experience. And you'd be like, okay, great. I'll be glad when they get there. And many times the people that you're speaking with in a certain neighborhood will be asking if that officer works there. And the interesting thing about being an outstanding officer, you will find out that people in the community knows that outstanding officer's schedule better than you do. They can tell you when the officer comes to work, when the officer is off, where they've been on vacation, because that officer has taken the time to connect with the community. And I was speaking with some individuals on yesterday about law enforcement in the community. And one of them asked about the officers living in the community and were asking if we were going to be having a requirement for officers to live within the jurisdiction. And when I gave them the analogy, said it would be great if you could do that. But there are some law enforcement jurisdictions where law enforcement officers are not compensated at a level to where they could even live within those jurisdictions. Then you also have it to where, for instance, me, I don't live in the jurisdiction that I work in, but I have been in the community, engaged in the community, in many community organizations. So really my heart is right there in the city. And I know many of the individuals, businesses, and people in there. How many times have you seen law enforcement professionals, or do you appreciate those law enforcement professionals that actually get there and are out there seeing the comments and they're out there working with the community? They're also able to solve more crimes than some of the other ones because people will talk to them. And also the public will give them information and they'll be able to help make the community even safer. But what are some of the things that you're really looking for that really lets you know that that officer is an outstanding officer? When I look at it, I'm looking at officers that go out there and engage the public, find out what the public really needs. Because if you look at it, we're public servants. We're out there serving the public. We're out there to reduce crime, and we're out there to build bridges, because many times we're the ones that are out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Anytime you call law enforcement department, we are going to be there. So it is incumbent upon us to be outstanding. And I was even talking to some other guys, and I've said many times when we're engaging or talking with the public, many times the public just wants to speak with us, give us information. They're looking to us for assistance. And many times some communities only see us when we're taking law enforcement action. How many times do we go over and we're in communities and we're not taking law enforcement action, but we actually go in and connect with the community, let them know that we care about what they're doing, attend the events, not because we have to. And how many times have you seen law enforcement officers attend an event, but they're not engaged in the event? They may be there, but standing on the side. And some of that could be the way that they interpreted training. Many times when we're going through training, we discuss command presence. Some people confuse command presence with acting like a robot or acting as though we're disengaged or some other negative tone with how we do our job. How you doing, LT Hightower? Glad you're able to make it on with us. And when we're talking about going out and engaging, it's kind of interesting when Lieutenant Hightower gets on and she talks about it. One of the things, if you ever want to see outstanding examples of engagement and community-oriented policing, you should check out Hollywood Police Department, Lieutenant Hightower, and the way that she does down there at their agency. That is what we're talking about as an example of outstanding officer. And she also deals with what I talk about is do not be your best kept secret, because many times we'll go out and because in our profession, we just do our jobs. We'll go out and do outstanding work, but we don't let anyone else know that we've done that. Unlike some other things, when you talk about our other public safety, when you talk about fire department, because a lot of their things, you don't have a lot of legal stuff that ties up with what they can and cannot post. They are the fan favorites. They are outstanding a lot of times with putting out there in social media what it is that they're doing and the bonds that they're making in the community and some of the things that they do. Here in Fort Lauderdale, as we were talking about it with our chief, we were going around talking about things that have happened and how we aren't really into the publishing a lot of things that we do. We had the kangaroo in our city, so that took a lot going on where people looking, seeing what was happening with the kangaroo in our city. But we don't really do a lot of putting out the good work that we do and putting out the things that we deal with, because many times being a public servant, we just look at that as part of our job. And when you look at it, most law enforcement agencies, if you look at it, we're talking about the engagement, we're talking about community service. I can tell you with many law enforcement agencies, the top of the organization really guides the organizations. And you'll find out that in many law enforcement organizations, your administrators, and a lot of times they come from the tactical background, your investigative background, your undercover backgrounds, and we're beginning to have a few more in upper management now that are coming from a community-oriented policing background, those that may have taught there, those that may have been school resource officers and community engagement units in the engagement teams. Right now, we're beginning to see that those engagements have really been helping us with relationships. Even when it came down with a lot of things that are going on in the community now with the protests, you will learn that the police departments and the organizations that were really engaged with the communities and had some true engagement had less collateral damage from a lot of the antagonists that joined the protests that were out there. Because when you're engaged with the individuals and you're working with them, that's all they're looking for. They're looking, a lot of times, this is a procedural justice thing that they're looking at. They're looking to hear their voice. They're looking for us to be fair. They're looking for us to be impartial when we're making our decisions. That is what it takes to really engage individuals. And one of the things when you're talking about it, this is a very easy one for us to think about. When you're out there in public, this is you as an individual, you as an organization, you have to get to connect with people. And I can't emphasize connecting enough, because as we're communicating right now, I'm trying to provide you different information, different tidbits, so that I can at least touch base and connect with the audience and those that are listening. Because for you to have any influence on any individual or organization, they must know you, like you, and trust you. And what's happening right now in law enforcement, sometimes the community does not know us. Other times they know us, and that could be why they don't like or trust us. And to give a different scenario, it's kind of like when you were in school. How many times did you go to school and you were in class? You may have said the teacher didn't like me. How many of you all as parents right now go over there and you hear your kids say that the teacher does not like them? But for them to really excel, if you look back on your academic careers, the classes that you got the highest grades in and you learned the most was where you figured that the teacher knew you, liked you, and you trusted them. Imagine if we apply that same type of philosophy in law enforcement. We need to let our community know us. Now, how do they get to know us? That's by us going out and being intentional about engaging the public, intentional about asking them to come in, intentional about asking them what it is that they need, intentional about acting on some of the things that they tell them to. And one thing that I found out is that the public, when they're asking us different questions, sometimes they generally are unfamiliar with what it is that we do and unfamiliar with what we can do. So a lot of times when you engage them and ask them, what is it that we do? How can we do it better? And they provide you some suggestions. You don't have to accept every suggestion, but at least you could have a dialogue, an open dialogue with the public to say, okay, I cannot do this because. I just had a discussion with individuals that were talking about how come police officers are not arrested, and it happened in another state and they immediately fired the officer and they just terminated them. Well, different states have different laws, different processes, but everything has a process. So when you're talking about an outstanding law enforcement officer, if you can think of an example for when someone was doing an outstanding job, then you can say, okay, this is what I would like to have in a law enforcement officer in my community. I'd like for them to go out, engage with us. I'd like for them to have more people coming from our community on the police department. Because many times I ask, how many individuals does a law enforcement agency have in their recruiting unit? Sometimes they'll look in their various units and they will say that they have 2 or 3. I will submit to you that your recruiting department should include everyone in your agency, because everyone in your agency serves as a commercial for your organization. When it's someone that comes into your front lobby, they're engaging the public. That's having a public contact. And I will give you an example of an outstanding organization with community service that has really been recognized for it. Is your organization like a Chick-fil-A or one of the other restaurants that's out there? Think about it. You can go to Chick-fil-A, they can have a tremendously long line, but no matter what, they have always been professional. They've always been happy, and it's always my pleasure. That's a difference. Is your organization up to that level of community service and that level of, I would say it's just service or common decency and going over and above to make people feel warm and fuzzy? Because when you make people feel great, then they will return that to you. When you look at your agency and you talk about those outstanding officers, when you look at your detective of the year, how well have they been connected with the public and how well have they been connected within the organization? Because as a team, that's what all comes together. Everything comes together. The more connections you have, the greater your chances are for success and the better things will work out for you. So right now, one example of the outstanding officers, they must be engaged. Also, do you think that outstanding officer should know their job? Do you think they should know what it is that they're doing? Do you think that they should have over and above training? What is it? Put it in the comments. Put down, what do you think your outstanding officer should have? What qualities should they have? Should they be able to deal in multiple communities? Because I think that when we focus so much on the negative, we miss an opportunity to let individuals know what it is that we're looking for. If we begin to focus on the positive, we will begin to get the positive. Many times in leadership talks, you hear people say, that which is measured is done. So if we stop penalizing or we start rewarding more of the things that we want, do you think individuals would start doing that more? If we started putting on evaluations or we started celebrating more of the engagement, do you think that that would help our officers be engaged? I was in a meeting with some leaders, and sometimes you look at the way that some organizations look at community-oriented policing, And individuals wonder, is this just a unit that you have that is community-oriented policing and engaging? Or is that a philosophy that you have throughout your entire organization where everyone is trying to engage and everyone is reaching out, everyone is going that extra mile? When you do that, you begin to create and build bridges that is going to allow you to, one, your officers are going to be safer because they have a bigger engagement with the public and with the community. You're also going to be able to increase the perception of the reduction in crime because the community knows you, they can reach out. And when they can reach out and touch you, that gives a different feeling of security. So when you're talking about outstanding officers, I've also dealt with some individuals and they talk about it in terms of degrees that individuals have had. I will submit to you that just because you have your high school diploma, your AA, your bachelor's, master's, doctorate, or your postdoc, I have noticed that sometimes our most professional officers are the ones that the only training or the only college they've had is that they got in the police academy. But they go out there, they do their jobs, they treat people with respect, they're very thorough in their investigations, they understand their piece in the puzzle within the organization, and they're also reaching back, grabbing, and assisting other individuals, so therefore the entire organization rises. So when we're out there and we're talking with individuals and you're talking about outstanding officers and you're talking about what they do, let's look at that because our supervisors all have come from the officer ranks. So if we're really trying to make a positive impact on our organization, we need to be recruiting individuals that have the characteristics that we're looking for as an outstanding officer. If you're trying to become a law enforcement officer, you need to look and see what characteristics are out there that identify an outstanding officer. Do that self-check and say, do I possess those qualities? And if you possess those qualities, are you letting others know that you possess those qualities? And how are you demonstrating those qualities so that you can join the ranks of us that have been in this rewarding profession? And once you're in the profession and you start seeing areas in your professional life that you can really improve to help further the mission of the organization and to help get you to where you wish to be, let's start doing it. Because we need to focus on our outstanding officers and focus on those outstanding professionals. Because once we do that and we fill our ranks with outstanding professionals, there will be no room in our profession for those that are less than outstanding. I am Dr. Gregory A. Salters, and you all have just been seasoned for success. I look forward to talking to you all again on our next chat. Be sure to follow me on YouTube. I'm here on Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and look forward for more information about how we can go from where we are to where we wish to be. You all have a good evening.